Welcome to It's Not About the Money, a podcast in search of grounded fundraising. I'm Heather, and together with my co-host Andy, we look beyond the quick tips and formulas. Join us as we explore the nuance and complexity of ministry fundraising. If you want to thrive in partner development, not just survive it, this is the place for you. Hey there, welcome back to It's Not About the Money. Today we are recapping the episode we had with Rebecca on the Strengths Finder. Andy, who's joining us?
Heather, I'm so excited to welcome to the show Wes Jones. And for those listeners who have been a part of the podcast for a while and part of Provisio for a while, Wes was a guest on our original OG season 1 of the podcast.
Yep.
So excited to have him back. He talked about communication back then and how he communicated from the field. So yes, Wes has been on the field in Asia and Southeast Asia. Before that, he was in a mobilization and coaching role, mentoring role. And now he is a certified life and leadership coach, and he also does fundraising coaching. So this feels like the perfect fit to recap this episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining us, Wes.
Hey, so good to be here. Thanks for having me, guys.
Okay, so on a recap, we typically just dive in with what stood out to us.
And we would love to have you do the honors, Wes, and start us off.
Okay, well, again, I loved listening to the podcast with Rebecca, thinking through Strengths Finders and how that relates to coaching and fundraising specifically. Something that stood out initially as I listened to that again and read through the transcript were definitely it was the benefits of focusing on strengths. I know that she had mentioned the parable of the talents and that correlation, with Strengths Finders and talents and really working within those strengths. So that's something that really stood out. It's something that I am currently not in the beginning stages of learning, but I feel like I'm relearning what that means. Having come away from serving overseas and working overseas, I'm in this time of transition. And so really learning what it means to work within my strengths.
Hey, to that point, it might be fun if we each just took a moment to share what our top 5 strengths are. Do you guys know yours?
That's a great idea.
I just happen to.
You just happen to?
Yeah, I think that ties in directly with what Rebecca was saying. Like, even as she was going through her own experience of kind of being retrained in fundraising and coming up against these obstacles, like they're asking me to do it in this way and it doesn't really jive with how I'm wired. Like, what they're asking me to do doesn't really fit. And I think when she refiltered it through her own perspective and her own strengths, that's when it really started to click for her. So I think that's a great idea. So yes, I do know mine. In order, top 5. And of course, again, she said that sometimes those top 10 can reshift. But when I took it years and years ago, adaptability, belief, ideation, individualization, and maximizer.
Nice.
So for me, when I think about my own fundraising journey, I think about like belief was definitely a strength that I could tap into as I'm casting vision for the work that's happening. But then individualization as well, I think, was also a benefit. And I can sit down with each person at a different place and just address them and see them for who they were and not just kind of, again, try to apply the formula to the conversation.
Well, we share one of the top 5. So my top is woo. I think we mentioned that in the episode.
Woo.
Now, for somebody who's not versed in Strength Finders, like what is that?
Winning others over.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So that's number 1.
Okay.
Number 2 is input. 3 is communication. 4 is belief. And 5 is responsibility.
I thought it would be belief. That's what I thought we would overlap on.
Yeah. We do.
For sure.
You're right.
Yeah.
What about you, Wes?
Yeah, so my top 5 are not surprising. First one is harmony. then connectedness, empathy, developer, and consistency. So I had a quick question. I remember these and they make a lot of sense, but I know that connectedness there it was a bit different. Do you remember what the strengths finder meaning for that one is?
Let's Google it.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'll look at that.
Looking at the other ones as I think through those again, it's been a while since I've really thought about the strengths finder and how that relates to where I'm at right now. Again, they make a lot of sense. I think in my fundraising journey, it makes total sense that harmony is number one. There's parts of that are really good for the support raising process, but I can also see how it brings in a bit of difficulty if I'm so focused on the relational side of things. It tends to bring a bit of fear into that, fear that there's rejection or the relationship could be hindered in any way, and so there's many positives in that developing of relationships within partnership and fundraising, but definitely seeing the weight of that other side is there as well.
Yeah. Well, and I don't want to muddy the waters too much by mixing different tools, but I happen to know that Wes is an Enneagram 9, which is also, his words make a lot of sense for an Enneagram 9.
Right.
Peacemaker.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and all those strengths were highly relational.
Yes.
Right.
And actually, I have a question for you just as it relates to coaching. Rebecca emphasized over and over that we have all the strengths, and, certainly the top 10 can kind of come to the surface as we're in different roles. I'm curious whether some of your strengths that are maybe in the 5 through 10 or 6 through 10 come out differently when you're coaching, because coaching, you're a little removed from needing to keep the peace and you're more of in an assertive questioning
speaking
place.
Into.
Yeah. So I'm curious if you see any different strengths rise up in that medium.
Oh yeah, very much. I think empathy is definitely going to be right there in the midst of coaching. Along with that, there needs to be a bit of that assertiveness. So that is something I've grown in, knowing that I need a lot of both within coaching. So empathy is definitely a big part of that, and it always has been, working in mobilization and encouraging others to go. Definitely developer. I think that's always been a piece of who I am. Again, in mobilizing and encouraging others to follow the Father and what He has for them. I see that so much in coaching, in life leadership, but also in the fundraising realm as well in coaching.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. Hey, quickly, I did look up connectedness. And you're right, it does kind of carry a bit of a different meaning than maybe we would have thought. So connectedness is a theme in the Gallup-Clifton Strengths Assessment that describes people who believe that all things are connected and that events have meaning. People with strong connectedness are often characterized by qualities such as acceptance, considerateness, and caring. They may also have a strong faith and be spiritually oriented. Makes sense.
Seems to fit.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So part of my life is needing to be a part of something that matters. That, at least for me, I feel that it's connected to something much, much bigger. And so that's such a big piece of who I am as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for any of our listeners that are intrigued by the strengths and want to look into it more, this was a quick Google search. So if you don't have the book yet and you're curious about any of the strengths you hear us talk about, you can just find it on Google.
Yeah. And even if you're worried about taking it, maybe you're worried and thinking, well, what if I find out my strengths and none of it plays into fundraising? I think knowing what they are will help you navigate and maybe fill in some of the gaps and just be aware of, okay, I tend towards being overly this way. And so I need to be aware of that as I'm walking into a season of fundraising.
Well, and we are whole people.
Yeah.
living our whole life, right? So fundraising is certainly a piece of what is happening in your life. And as we talked about in the episode with Rebecca, the book even notes that people that were operating more in their strengths were 6 times as likely to be engaged in their jobs and more than 3 times as likely to report having an excellent quality of life in general.
Wow.
So I would submit, I mean, it's important to know and lean into your strengths in the whole of your life, because as you are finding maybe fulfillment or encouragement, maybe even in an area that's not directly related to fundraising, that's absolutely going to affect the way you show up in fundraising, right? Because it's yet another way that you've been energized or encouraged, or wind has been put in your sails,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And I would also remind you that Rebecca said she thinks any of the strengths can be framed to see a benefit in connecting with other people.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Or in accomplishing the tasks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like when we think of the domains, so there's the executing, influencing, relationship building, and strategic thinking. Gosh, I feel like all of those domains span the different functions, duties, and responsibilities of the fundraising season.
Mm-hmm. And if you've just took the test and you're wondering, like, how does my particular mix impact fundraising? Well, that could be a way that a coach
Totally
could help you navigate through that.
Yeah, that's true, Andy.
Little plug for coaches everywhere.
I'm curious, guys. So I talked a little bit about my top 5 strengths and how they've related to the support raising process. I'm curious how that's been for you guys, if you've seen that play out in your experiences.
Yeah, you know, I would be reticent to say, I think that this is what caused this, you know, definitively.
Right.
But I do think there's probably strong correlation. And in my top 5, having woo and communication, I think that really helped me in a lot of my initial fundraising, because so much of your initial fundraising is, you know, meeting with people you might not know well, finding ways of bridging connection with them, finding ways to communicate and inspire. And so I think that those are definitely pieces that are part of woo and communication. So I think that was helpful. I think, you know, maybe to think about the shadow side, or to maybe see how, you know, those are really high for me, but some other, for example, I don't really have much going on. And actually, I don't have anything going on in the executing domain. I shared the story in the episode with Rebecca that I wrote a ton of thank you notes and then didn't send them. I think that, you know, in my own fundraising, I saw the absence of executing in just the things were a little bit harder for me to follow up on or stay on task with.
Yeah, I kind of talked about belief and individualization, but as I think about it, like all of these really are helpful. Adaptability and kind of navigating just the timing and the schedules and all that kind of stuff. Like you can't be super rigid and saying, hey, I can only meet on Thursday nights. You have to be nimble there. I think just ideating and maximizing just wanting to do our best as we're talking with people and giving presentations and putting together our materials. I think those all contributed. And I think I never paid for the full version of Strength Finders, but I think connectedness is definitely up there for me too, and probably my top 10. So there's a purpose behind everything. So I connect with that. I relate with that as well too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I can't remember my top 10. I think belief was in there as well.
Yeah.
That would make sense.
Yeah. Checks out.
I was curious what you guys thought about the topic of comparison. I know Rebecca mentioned just that comparison is killer, especially when we're looking at different strengths and how some may seem better than others, and wanting other strengths maybe. How have you seen that play out in your guys' lives as you've looked at the Strengths Finder?
Yeah, I don't know if I would be able to tie it back to the Strengths Finder, but you're right. Comparison is a huge issue, and we actually deal with it every time somebody goes through Provisio.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about that at the end of like kind of the ongoing obstacles. And it's tricky because let's say that you are in an environment in a church where there's a lot of people that are fundraising, or a lot of your friends are in a similar season. Yeah, it can be tempting to compare yourself to them and think, why isn't the Lord working in my life the way that he's working in their lives? And even if that's not you, even if, let's say that you've never done it before, you can compare your current trajectory to how you expected it would go, to your expectations. Or you can compare it to a previous season of fundraising and like, oh, things are going differently now. They're not, aren't happening. So, you know, I just watched the movie Dune. So I'm going to bring in a little bit of pop culture here.
Dune 1 or Dune 2?
Yep.
Okay.
There's a thing that Paul's mom keeps saying, Jessica keeps saying, fear is a mind killer. Comparison's the mind killer.
Well, it is the thief of joy.
It is. It's absolutely, yeah. It's the thief of joy. Yeah. So great observation there.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Something else that kind of, I think, ties into this. In the episode with Rebecca, we talk about the way it's put forward as like the right way or the way you should go about raising your funds. And, you know, really that's made up of a lot of best practices. But I think that there's some people, and I would say myself included, that can kind of look at what's put forward as the ideal and can have really intense comparison of myself in relation to that ideal. Am I measuring up to the way I should be doing this? Is this the right way? So I think that that's another way comparison can work out, is if there's kind of a standard put out there, kind of a one way to do it. And then I think honestly, especially for people that kind of operate in the world in a little bit of a different way, like Rebecca was saying, that can feel so disheartening and stifling. It's put forward as a way to encourage and equip. But I think depending on the way that message lands and the way you uniquely show up to the world, it can actually have a really adverse effect.
Deflating, defeating.
Yeah.
The thought that, well, this is great for those people, but it's not meant for me.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I would say that some of my strengths actually work really well in tandem with kind of the way you're told to fundraise. Call up people you don't know, have a direct conversation with them. It's high woo, high communication in some ways, but it's just interesting to think about. I don't know, even operating in your strengths more from like a compliance than from an actual operating out of your strengths, if that makes sense. And I was really intrigued by what Rebecca said towards the beginning of the episode, where she said, hey, these are put forward, but actually for them to become strengths, they have to be cultivated. And I think that was actually a big miss for me in my initial fundraising season. Is I think I relied heavily on, these are just inherently part of me. And that's why I say I think I kind of complied and used them. Whereas now I feel like I understand more and I've developed them more so that utilizing them might have the same outward effect, but would be coming from a place of authenticity versus compliance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's almost like it should have been called the talent finder, because talents need to be nurtured into strengths.
Yeah, maybe so.
That's good.
You can let Mr. Clifton know.
Yes, I'll do that.
Yeah, he'll take it. I've seen that at play with the developer side of the Strengths Finder for me. I think early on in my life, young college student, I think there was a sense of wanting to help others that was there, but not really knowing what that meant or what it would look like. And it really has taken years. And I'll be honest, I feel like I'm just now in my early 40s, really learning what that looks like, and actually using it in ways and really being energized by that, seeing that play out and being able to use that and seeing how that strength being used is really energizing. Walking away from a coaching meeting with someone and just feeling really energized by that, knowing that there was a lot of benefit for them through that process.
Yeah, it's like in the development and the cultivation of that talent into a strength, there's so much power unleashed, you know?
And just think about it in terms of your whole life. Like, you have a limited amount of time to invest in yourself and to develop yourself. So if you were to take all 20 strengths, is there 20 of them?
No, there's more than that.
More than 20. So 20 plus, and try to invest equally in all those things, you would be mediocre at best and just kind of like, you know, not kind of dull, you know? So that's not the goal. And so that's what I like about this is like, let's just start with how the Lord has wired you, and let's sharpen those things and become kind of follow the trajectory that he's already set us on.
Well, and you know what's interesting? I actually underlined and highlighted that I wanted to speak to what you said in the episode to that regard. You know, you said, let's accelerate what we're good at rather than being kind of moderate at everything.
Yeah.
And it just makes me think about how culturally right now we're in this, like, I don't know, it kind of feels like there's these dual things. One is like, you, be unique. But then the other is like, you need to kind of become optimized in all these areas. So it's kind of like trying to form the ideal person that works out and does Wordle and, you know, volunteers in the classroom and whatever.
I'm failing.
Oh, I forgot about Wordle.
Yeah.
Yeah. So simultaneously, there's these messages of like, be authentic, be unique, and you need to be optimized in these different ways. And so
we're getting mixed messages.
Yeah, we're getting mixed messages. And I think there is just kind of a trying to manage all the things and bring all the things forward instead of kind of like honing in and focusing, prioritizing, cultivating, you know, which kind of takes me back to our conversation with Jolly, where he was like, everything can't matter at the same time. And so,
good.
I don't know, I think that applies here too. And it's just important to, like you said, accelerate what you're good at, prioritize, and really build strength. Yeah.
Well, and I think, and this is not a plug. Well, it can be. No, not a plug for coaching, but when you are able to bring all of this into community or in the relationship of like a coach-client relationship, someone that can help you hone in on certain things, it's really important. Yeah, I think for me, there was a long period of time where I didn't have strong community. I didn't have a lot of people that knew me well who could help develop some of those skills or those strengths. And so I've learned a lot about that through community and coaching with others and finding those that could help me clearly see, hey, you're really good in a few areas. Don't try to be really good at a lot. It's not going to work. In on some of these and get really good at that.
Yeah. It's helpful to have an outside perspective that doesn't have as much stake in it, and that can kind of see things a little more clearly, maybe.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and also speaking of community, something else I really appreciated from the episode was when we were just speaking to how, you know, understanding strengths can be helpful for your own operating in the world. It also is just really helpful in the context of relationship with other people. You know, she had that example that she shared of that husband and wife that one of them took it and then realized, oh, I'm in this domain, you know, pushing things forward, and you're in that domain deliberating and thinking about things. And oh my goodness, that's kind of a critical realization when you're in that close of a relationship with someone, you know? And then just thinking about the implications for team and really having the tools and language to reframe maybe that behavior that really bothers you or that you don't understand or that you really value and want to apply in your own life. And, you know, not in a comparison way, or hopefully not in a comparison way, but just being able to identify what it is in other people that we admire or need to have grace with, you know?
Yeah. It works with those that you are complete opposites, how you can complement each other, but
yes,
also with those that you're really similar to. So my wife and I are both nines on the Enneagram. We're both harmony.
How do you decide where to go out to eat?
That's what's happened. We've learned how to be assertive when needed. And so you know those strengths, you know that you are similar in a lot of areas. And it's like, okay, this is really good in a lot of ways, but it's very clear some areas that we need to work on. And so thinking through, okay, let's hone in on these skills and get really good at them. But we also need to make up, for the fact that we're identical.
Yeah.
Well, as we're kind of wrapping things up, I guess, Wes, I'm curious. I know you're working with a few clients in their initial fundraising season. I'm curious if there's any strengths you see playing out or any ways that you can kind of identify some of these themes in those clients.
It's a great question. I think as I think through those that I'm coaching currently, they're very relational, which is good, and I relate to. So I think I'm able to kind of help them with that strength, but also bring a bit of wisdom, knowing how that can be negative in some ways, and how to combat that. So they're very relational as they think through their calling story and how to present this to people. They're doing really well at that. They're bringing just a real personal touch to it, something that's relatable. And so that's something that's really stood out with them.
Very cool. Very cool. I would be really encouraged to, I guess, get feedback from people how they see their strengths playing out in their fundraising. So, listener, if you want to let us know, we would love to hear that, maybe even highlight it on the show.
And it makes me think, like, it kind of makes sense to have our clients take the strength finders.
Yeah.
Before entering or during, while they're in the middle of fundraising, just to kind of really be able to analyze what they're bringing to the conversation.
Yeah. Well, because again, we think that fundraising is not necessarily this kind of like siloed thing you got to do in life, but it's definitely part of your overall kind of like formation as a person. Yeah. And the thing I love about that idea is that, any of the tools and ways that you grow in fundraising are certainly going to come to bear on other parts of your life and in your development as a whole. And that tool is certainly set up well to be a strength in many areas.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we should link to that in the show notes for sure. Yep. And just to be clear, we get no kickbacks from Clifton.
We don't get kickbacks from anything.
From anything, yeah.
We just are enthusiastic about a lot of things.
And maybe we could also put a link in there to how to contact Wes if you are looking for a coach.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds good to me.
Awesome.
Well, Wes, thank you so much for your time and for your insight. We really appreciate that. And listeners, we will catch you next time.
It's Not About the Money is presented by Provisio Fundraising Solutions. Provisio equips support-based workers with flexible training, practical resources, and one-on-one coaching. Find out more at provisiofundraising.com.